Hi, my name is Peter Nelson. I am president of Nelson Insurance Advisors. We specialize in using non-woke Catholic fraternal insurance companies in order to protect our clients and members, whether it be in regards to life insurance or retirement planning. We have over 23 years of experience in the insurance industry, and we want to do business with people that believe the way that we believe. So please reach out to us at 423-793-2613, or you can find us on our website at nelsonplan.com. God bless and Godspeed.
It's all politics. It's become apparent that the American bishops and bishops elsewhere in the Western world have replaced the faith with politics, with political activism. They've at least confounded the gospel as being a political action program, because it's natural that if you were to live the gospel and expect others to live the gospel, and to expect the political system that you are part of to at least be influenced by the gospel, that there would be some political action being taken by church officials when it's appropriate. Whether we're in such a moment now, I'm sure some of you will think we are. The problem is they've essentially confounded the gospel or replaced it with political activism. And I'm going to show you this here shortly, but I want to give you an update that's a warning. We live in a time of deception where people, many of them Catholics, will brazenly just make things up and put it on social media, often as part of a larger grift, as an attempt to take advantage of people for profit. Gloria TV's EN News Service shared this from Koinobium. Here's the story. On Sunday, the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem published a brief warning that fraudsters are impersonating Cardinal Pizzaballa using the fake email address cardinal.pizzaballa@gmail.com. This is not his official email address. If you've received any emails from this address, do not reply, click, or share personal info. Guys, I would hope that it's obvious that this would not be the email address of a cardinal of the Catholic Church. But unfortunately, there were people who were taken in by this because they don't understand that there are people who will prey on others using the names of famous people to try to get money out of them. I'll give you a wonderful example of this. If you're on Facebook, mostly you see this on Facebook, you see a lot of social media accounts claiming to be, I saw Taylor Marshall with one, I saw Bishop Strickland, I saw anybody you care to name. They all were like add friend kind of accounts, like normal accounts, and those were clearly not those people. And yet many of people that I was friends with were mutual friends with those accounts. Those figures, especially ecclesiastical figures, as well as anybody who's a public figure, are not going to have a private Facebook account under their name. Instead, they're going to have a public figure account, and then if they have a personal account, it will be disguised in some way so they can be in contact with friends and family. They're not going to be publicly available for the most part. I'm the exception to that rule because I don't care. Mine's the only one you'll find of me on Facebook, I think, is my personal account. But I assure you that Pope Leo XIV does not have a public Facebook account under the name Pope Leo XIV. Okay? There's a lot of these out there, and they use them to try to get money out of people. So beware. The other example of this, obviously, are all the fake AI YouTube channels that are cloning Bishop Robert Barron's name or voice, cloning Pope Leo XIV's voice, cloning Cardinal Burke's voice, and others, putting up channels under the name of like Pope Leo XIV Wisdom and Reason and Tradition or something like that. And what they end up doing is spreading misinformation, often just making up homilies, putting them to Pope Leo's voice using AI, and then making it sound like the Pope said something when he didn't. A lot of people can't tell. We live in an age of deception, and now they're trying to use Cardinal Pizzaballa's name, obviously for probably some financial fraud of some kind. It's unfortunate, so be advised if you get an email from cardinal.pizzaballa@gmail.com, it's not his real email address. With that, let's talk about a different kind of fraud, and that's the fraud involving misuse of the gospel. We go to Flagger.live.com. The headline, the Catholic clergy takes a stand on immigration. Now, this is going to be celebrating what they're doing. But many of the clergy, bishops, cardinals, priests, and deacons have decided that the Catholic Church's teaching on immigration isn't sufficient and doesn't apply to what is going on in the U.S. right now. Instead, they will say that the U.S. is guilty of violating the human dignity of the immigrant. That is what they will say. And they will absolve those who enter the country illegally of all wrongdoing. Now, is it true that government officials have to respect the human dignity of the people in question? Yes, it's true. And that is why this topic should be handled by Catholics who understand what the church teaches and aren't just engaging in a partisan political project. I brought to you a video yesterday of the U.S. bishops having been caught trying to get Hillary Clinton elected president 8 years ago. Take this as part of that larger program. From the article, quote, Catholic priests across the U.S. discuss immigration with their congregations more than leaders in many other faith traditions, according to our new research published in the journal Sociological Focus. Catholic priests also said they discussed immigration more than nearly all other political issues, including hunger in their communities, capital punishment, healthcare, and the environment. The sacrifice to Moloch was the only one priests discussed slightly more often. Our study, which uses data from the 2022 National Survey of Religious Leaders, found that 71% of Catholic priests surveyed they spoke about any political issue with their congregations. Among them, just over half talked about immigration. End quote. Now, that's from 2022. It's worse now. It is, by their own admission, the number one issue they talk about now. The bishops have said, and I've covered this in the past, that immigration has become the preeminent issue for them. Not the sacrifice to Moloch of the most vulnerable, either at the beginning or the ends of their lives. No, not that. That was from the 70s until a couple of years ago was the case. Now it's immigration. And they're taking a hardline partisan bent on this. It is really destructive of their ministry to do this, but that's what they're doing. And at least here from the survey from 3 years ago, they were admitting what they were doing. Quote, in white conservative Protestant congregations, black Protestant congregations, and non-Christian congregations, only about a quarter of leaders who discussed political issues said they talked about immigration. Leaders of white liberal Protestant congregations, however, talked about the topic almost as much as Catholic leaders did. So, white liberal Protestant congregations talk about that issue less than Catholic bishops do. Wrap your head around that one. The United States has a long history of religious leaders addressing political matters on both the left and right, and today is no different. With immigration actions on the rise across the country and an unprecedented level of funding approved for removal, Catholic bishops in the U.S. are speaking out. Many of them have called for compassion and care for migrants, and the need to uphold human dignity and due process regardless of someone's immigration status, in line with Catholic social teaching. As sociologists who study politics and religion, we wanted to know what is happening on the ground in congregations. Given the church's teachings about caring for the vulnerable, we expected the Catholic clergy might be particularly likely to speak out. However, the percentage of people affiliated with the religious congregation is decreasing, and those who do attend are increasingly political conservative. Rank-and-file Catholics are very divided on their support for immigrants, according to a 2024 national survey by the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate. In this context, we were curious about whether clergy would discuss a political issue such as immigration with their congregations, or say they avoid it altogether. And you get the idea. They are the biggest activists in all of religious ministry, it seems like, on this issue. The Catholic bishops are. Who is surprised by this? Anybody? I don't think you are. I'm not surprised by this either. As Raven Ray in the chat says, their support for unwanted visitors will eventually backfire as if they expect the visitors to reciprocate and support them. We know from the data that most of them who come here may have been Catholic when they got here, but within a few years of arrival, they do what a lot of Catholics do. They leave the faith. They go become Protestants or they become functional atheists. If you don't believe me, if you're living in like the southern half of the United States anywhere, from California to Florida and anywhere in between, go drive around some of your cities and large suburban areas and take note of the Spanish language Protestant chapels you see. It's a lot of them, especially in my area. A lot of them. And they're just mirroring what's going on in South America and Central America. The U.S. bishops and the bishops of those countries sit by idly while American missionaries from the global north go to Central America and South America and lead people out of the church and lead them into American-style evangelical Protestantism. That's not a good thing. In fact, a lot of these missionaries are very crafty in how they do this. They will actually use images of Our Lady of Guadalupe and other similar kinds of imagery associated with Latin American Catholicism to lead people out of the faith. It's amazing. I've seen it firsthand, and it's unfortunate. And you might wonder, why are the U.S. bishops so political? Well, they are getting support from the Pope. Go to Archbishop Gomez's Instagram. You probably can't read this because of how he posted it here, but I'll put a link in my show notes at returntotradition.org or at the Anthony Stine Substack. Links are in the description box below. Archbishop Gomez met with the Holy Father, and he posted this 2 days ago with this caption. What a joy to meet with our Holy Father today. Pope Leo XIV expressed concern over the situation with immigrants in our country, meaning the U.S., and he was enthusiastic when I told him all the good news from LA Catholics. New vocations, our communications and evangelization initiatives, all the energy and creativity in our parishes, schools, and other ministries. Our Holy Father said he is praying for all of us, and I assured him of our continued prayers. So the Pope has expressed concerns about the status of immigrants in the U.S. Now, that can mean a lot of things. Take what he has said about immigration. You know, he's on the team of those who are very political about this. And there has been a distinct lack of teaching from bishops and from the Holy Father about the duty of immigrants according to church teaching. They never will tell you that the church has formally taught that when somebody comes into a new country to live, they're to respect the laws there, including on entry. They're to assimilate. They're not to try to change the culture. They're trying to be productive members of society. That is what they're to do. And that's not what has happened in anywhere in the West lately. It's an unfortunate thing. I'm going to give you a bit of a good news on this. Controversial, but it's good news. The headline from the Catholic News Agency, Miami Archdiocese celebrates its first Mass at Alligator Alcatraz. Now, they were rightly being criticized that clergy were not being allowed in to offer the sacraments, including confession and holy sacrifice of the Mass, to those who were Catholic who were in that facility. That has since changed. They are being allowed in to do the work of the church. Part of what freedom of religion is, what it means, according to the Catholic Church, is that the church is free to do its work in the world, its actual mission, which is first and foremost the salvation of souls. In this case, the offering of the sacraments to people who are clearly needing them. And so it is good news that they have access to the facility. And hopefully the priests who are going in will be able to report out to the rest of the world that that place is not some evil place like out of some World War II movie or something, that this is actually just part and parcel of how the U.S. has handled this issue, just in a more creative way. Here are the details from this article, which came from Catholic News Agency. As part of a new Catholic ministry, the Archdiocese of Miami celebrated its first Mass at the Florida Detention Center for Unauthorized Immigrants, known as Alligator Alcatraz. I am pleased that a request to provide for the pastoral care of the detainees has been accommodated, Archbishop Thomas Wensky said in an August 3rd statement. Also, we were able to respond to a request to provide similar service to the staff who reside at the facility. In a July interview with EWTN News in Depth, Wensky said his greatest concern was the health and care of the people that are being detained at the facility. He and other advocates were calling for a minimum of standards and said that one of those standards should be access to pastoral care. At the time, he explained his archdiocese was having difficulty arranging masses and spiritual care for the immigrants being held because the Florida state government and the federal government were arguing among themselves who was accountable for detention care. After months of discussions between Florida bishops, archdiocesan leadership, and state correctional authorities, an arrangement was finally reached. Chaplains and pastoral ministers from the Archdiocese of Miami will have full access to the facility to offer liturgical masses for detainees and staff. The first Mass was held on August 2nd and is just the start of the regular liturgical celebrations expected at the center. The Archdiocese reported that it will continue the ministry, quote, following the facility's guidelines and the pastoral availability of our clergy. The Archdiocese plans to have a successful and consistent Catholic presence at Alligator Alcatraz that will depend on effective ordination and coordination. The goal is to ensure a stable schedule of sacramental care and pastoral ministry that meets the spiritual needs of both attendees and staffs, with the support of clergy and committed lay people. The Church has no borders, for we are all members of one human family, he said. Our agenda was always to announce the good news to the poor. And hopefully that will quell some of the critiques coming from bishops, maybe curb their political enthusiasm just a little bit. I'm frankly not that hopeful. Now, on the flip side of the coin, I think a more orthodox approach to it, a lot of this, even if it's from 10,000 feet above, comes from Cardinal Burke with the Life site headline, Cardinal Burke, Archbishop Cordileone, will celebrate the traditional pontifical Mass on Tuesday, meaning today. The eminent prelate will offer the Mass of the Americas as a solemn traditional Latin Mass at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Wisconsin on Tuesday, 12:15 p.m. Central Time. So yes, Cardinal Raymond Burke and Archbishop Cordileone are going to be offering a Mass. And here what it's about. Quote, Cardinal Raymond Burke and Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone will celebrate a solemn pontifical Mass at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which Cardinal Burke founded on Tuesday. The esteemed prelates, who are known for their defense of liturgical reverence and orthodoxy, will celebrate the Mass of the Americas as a traditional Latin Mass at the shrine located in La Crosse, Wisconsin. The Mass of the Americas is a tribute to Our Lady of Guadalupe and Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception, commissioned by Archbishop Cordileone and composed by Frank LaRocca of the Pope Benedict XVI Institute for Sacred Music and Divine Worship. The Mass of the Americas integrates Gregorian chant with traditional Mexican melodies such as La Guadalupana, the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe noted. Archbishop Cordileone, who leads the Archdiocese of San Francisco, will be the principal celebrant of the Mass, which begins at 12:15 Central, will be aired later on EWTN. And I'm very curious here, because as he says here, they often celebrate the Mass of the Americas in the ordinary form, but this is the first time they're doing this in the traditional form. And I'm just, the questions I have here, is it normal to incorporate the kind of not traditionally sacred music into the traditional form? To my knowledge, no, but I'm prepared to be wrong about that. So let me know. I don't generally have a problem with what they're doing. I'm just curious. I'm curious what you think about that. So let me know in the comments. This is all part and parcel, what we've seen here, of political activism, and hopefully more with the news from that facility in Florida, offering masses for those who need it and want it, including the people who work there. We can get some of this political fire tamped down a little bit from the bishops. Right now, the reality in the church is this. According to every bit of research data out there, most Catholics who attend Mass on a regular basis, which is not most Catholics, do not believe in the real presence of our Lord and Savior in the most blessed sacrament of the altar. They believe it is a symbol. And certainly there is a symbolic part of the Eucharist, but it is not symbolic. Jesus Christ is truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. Many Catholics don't believe that, which means many Catholics, without even realizing it, aren't Catholic anymore. They have become something else. That's a big deal. The U.S. bishops should spend some energy on that. They had their Eucharistic revival last year. You remember that? Lots of people went and participated. Didn't seem to have much of an effect, though. They should focus on that, because that is having to do with the salvation of souls, while they can continue to minister to those who are being detained by the state. But they shouldn't be trying to take from Caesar what is his, which is the right and duty to enforce the laws of the country on this issue. That's the problem. Not allowing them to have access to the sacraments was excessive from the government. It was an overreach, pretty heinous one, but it's been corrected. Looks like the problem was bureaucratic lack of communication and an administrative headbutting. Tale as old as time if you've ever studied the way government operations are run, especially when we are talking about the interchange between state and federal governments in the US. That's not all today. We have news out of the youth jubilee that happened recently. If you're not aware of the Jubilee of the Youth, recently there were two events happening in Rome at the same time. One was a social media influencer jubilee, where they got to listen to a homily from the Pope and go and meet with Vatican officials and make good contacts there. Famously, Michael Lofton recently posting images on social media about how many good contacts he's made and all the good ideas he's given to the Vatican about social media. I don't know if I like that, but that happened. At the same time that was happening, there was also a Jubilee meeting for youth in Rome. The jokes write themselves, I'm sure, for some non-believers who are hostile to the faith watching this. But the Vatican has been desperately trying to keep young people in the church, and they're not willing to do the one thing that does work, which is, of course, offering them access to the traditional Mass if they want it, offering them access to solemn worship if they want it. Instead, they give you a lot of pop rock stuff and all this other junk that goes on, including at that meeting, there was, as I showed you a few days ago on this channel, Italian pop singers performing at St. Peter's for them, secular pop music. Bizarre. But one of the things that the Vatican did in that story was ask youth leaders what they wanted. One of our classic critiques of the Synod on Synodality, when it began to shake out on how it was going to actually go, was that the lay participants of the Synod were hand-picked. They were chosen to give options to the church hierarchy on an acceptable range of solutions to whatever the problem was. That they had the right opinions or acceptable opinions. That's why you didn't see traditionalists there. It's why you didn't even see very conservatives there. You had moderates and progressives and worse. And it looks like the Jubilee for the youth was no different. We go here to CathCon, where we get this story. Headline, Synod as a career path. No reference to God and one reference to Jesus by the Federation of German Catholic Youth. Now, I bring you this story because there is a reputation that young people have in the church. People like myself like to point out the traditional Mass, when you go to it, is mostly dominated by the young. It's young people, whether they're single or married with young families, are the ones mostly going there. Statistically, that is correct. Anecdotally, that is correct. Every traditional Mass I've been to has been dominated by younger people. The average age at those Masses is like 30-something, which is 20 to 25 years younger than that at your typical ordinary form parish. Statistics bear this out repeatedly. That doesn't mean that the kids are all right either, because the Vatican brought out those who like the way things are in the church, generally speaking, to give the voice of the young as input in a synodal fashion. Here's what they had to say. It's not about patience, but about justice. With clear words and strong demands, young people at the Women in the Church youth hearing on July 30th in Rome made clear what they expect from a credible and sustainable church. In the eyes of these young people, the church is not credible. As part of the Holy Year and the Youth Anniversary, the Federation of German Catholic Youth invited people to the youth hearing, and around 50 young people accepted the invitation. The focus on the event was the role of women in the Catholic Church, their voices, their experiences, and above all, their demands for structural reforms, greater gender equality in the Catholic Church. The BDKJ Federal Chairwoman Daniela Hottenbacher emphasized, quote, those in charge in the church must listen to young people, especially young women, and act accordingly. The demand for equal rights and the participation of women in leadership positions and ministries in our church is not a marginal note, but a core issue for young Christians, not only in Germany, but worldwide. A church with a future can no longer ignore this issue. I'm going to pause there. They believe that it's the young who want this taken care of. It's not. But they believe that. And so they found young people who share their opinions on this. For the church to be credible and sustainable, it's as if they're framing this in existential language, meaning the very existence of the church is at threat if they don't ordain women, if they don't give more leadership roles to the ladies. That is what they're saying here. It is an existential threat. The church will not survive. The gates of hell shall not prevail against her, saith the Lord. Pretty sure that the church will survive without their structural reforms that are needed. But perhaps they don't believe this. Remember, political activism is the rule of the day in the church. And it's being brought into all discussions of reform. What's not being brought into the discussions here is a conversion of heart, a conversion away from sin, away from death and sin and everything that separates us from God. That we are to reform our lives first. If you want to reform the church, go to confession more often, pray more, keep the 5 First Saturdays devotion, bring a friend with you, bring a relative with you, and eventually they'll do the same. Be a cascading effect. That is how St. Francis of Assisi and St. Dominic reformed the church. They did it through prayer. They did it through fasting and preaching the gospel and calling people to repentance. That is how you get reform. Authentically Christian, authentically Catholic reform of the church begins in your heart and in your mind with the conforming of your will to and the way you live to what the faith commands us to do. That is where it starts. And they won't see it. They believe that the institution needs to reform, to adopt modern political standards. They framed everything there in modern political language. So don't be shocked that when they invite people who have a political view of the world as opposed to a Christian view of the world, that they get political solutions to Christian debates. Quote, at the youth hearing, Gudrun Saylor, Vatican journalist and founding member of the Women in the Vatican Association, and Sister Natalie Beckwart, Undersecretary of the Synod of Bishops and member of the Dicastery for Communication, described their experiences as women in the Vatican. Pauline Erdmann, BDKG Diocesan Chairwoman in Munich and Friesing, and BDKJ Federal Chairwoman Daniela Holtenbacher brought the perspectives of youth association members from Germany into the discussion. The young people were present were also able to contribute, including by using green and red cards to express their agreement or disagreement with statements made on the podium. I'm going to pause there. I'm laughing because 10 years ago or so, while I was wrapping up my graduate studies, I was serving in student leadership at my university. I was the most conservative person in the room most of the time. And the silly red and green card thing, just like telling people how you identify and all that other stuff, comes from college universities in the United States and Canada. That's where it comes from. And we've successfully exported that nonsense to Germany and to Europe. They're running it like some cheesy student government meeting. And it's the funniest thing to see people who should be very serious. After all, we're talking about the salvation of souls, are we not? That's what the church is about. First law of the church, salvation of souls, not political inclusion. None of that stuff. Salvation of souls, first and foremost. And everything else flows from that mission. And here they are using silly things like this. We believe the youth hearing is an important part of the Youth Jubilee program. It creates an opportunity for debate and exchange. This, in addition to the spiritual and tourism program, is important for young people during these days. They want to actively shape the church. They have ideas and positions, and it's worth actively involving them. Danielle Hottenbacher explained the significance of the event for their organization. The discussion also made clear the church loses great potential when it excludes more than half of its members from leadership because of their gender. When all genders participate, let me say that again. When all genders participate, better results are achieved, which is particularly evident in peace processes. Pope Leo repeatedly emphasizes how important it is for us as Christians to work for peace in the world. True peace cannot arise without justice. Therefore, we as a church should lead by example and recognize the signs of the times. She emphasizes, end quote, oh, when all genders participate. That is a person working for the Vatican and working for the church in Germany to reach out to the youth. They're not even Catholic. That's not Catholic language. Violates basic precepts of the Genesis account of the creation of man. But here we are. The youth aren't always all right. We place a lot of hope in younger Catholics moving politically and culturally, and yes, religiously, to quote-unquote the right, whatever that means in the context of the church, towards tradition and orthodoxy, meaning little o orthodoxy. The traditional Mass, when they're not going to the traditional Mass, it's to a Novus Ordo Mass that is presented in a way that is the priest and the participants clearly understand as best as human being can what is happening at that altar. And they take it with the gravity that it deserves. But it's not always the case. After all, if you've ever been to a youth Mass at most parishes where it's like young people singing praise and worship rock and roll songs at Mass. I don't care if you listen to that stuff in your own time. Don't bring rock music to a Mass, please. It's young people, but it's also led by older people who keep trying to keep the culture of the 1970s alive and that spirit of reform in the church. And it is withering away, but they're trying to take the most activist elements of young people and foist it upon them to recruit them to their cause to keep the revolution in the church going. That is what they're doing. Jerome asks, at what point will it be okay to say that the ape of the church is now present? I don't have a good answer for you for that. Not yet, anyway. Traditionalist Catholic says, this sounds like university academics talking to each other. Yeah, it is. The high priests of the secular religion are your university academics, and their deacons are the media. And the God they serve is the state. I'm curious what you all think about this, so let me know in the comments. Please pray for everybody we spoke about today, those German activists who are in the Vatican. Whoever in the Vatican is on their side, pray for them as well. No need to stir you up in anger towards them. Pray for them instead. Use that anger you might feel to pray for them. It is one of the greatest acts of charity you can do, but also resist everything they're doing. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.